2010 that we first got a glimpse of Tata's new MPV, the Arya. However, it was confined to being just that, a glimpse. Because although the Arya was loaded with a lot of features and equipment not found on the competition, it came at a premium, and that was the price that people were just not prepared to pay. Now, although cheaper variants were introduced later on, but the damage had been done and people just didn't take kindly to this particular MPV. Now, 4 years later on, Tata has come back with a facelift version of the Arya. Let's just take a look at it. With this new facelift, you now get clear lens tail lamps, black bezel projector headlamps, and stylized decals at the side of the car. Apart from the cosmetic changes that not many people are unfortunately going to notice, the biggest change is under the bonnet. That's right, in the engine department. Now, although the engine is the same 2.2-litre die-core unit that was powering the earlier, but the biggest change has been that it has now been tuned to produce 10 more horsepower than before. The minute you step inside the Arya, you begin to appreciate the amount of space that's available. I mean, after all, this is supposed to carry 7 people in comfort, and judging by the space there is, I think it'll do just that very nicely. Now, also you'll appreciate the fact that the dashboard, it's made of nice plastic over here, and what I really like is the fact that we've got these soft touch plastics here, and even on the door over here. So in case you put your hand, well, it's a nice and comfortable place to be. The dashboard itself again is color coordinated with the seats, which again goes to extend the design of the interiors of the Arya. I also particularly like the brushed aluminium feel over here in the AC vents, and it kind of gives it a nice classy and a premium feel. Also, we said that the Arya is loaded with features, but one thing you'll appreciate again is the minimalistic design on the center console. I mean, everything's just there. It's just that the buttons have been so dramatically reduced that you only have a few buttons and you can access mostly all the features. Now let's just jump in the back and see the kind of creature comforts that are available for the passengers in the Arya. Well, the driver's seat has been adjusted for my driving position, but still there's enough and more leg space that's available over here. The minute you get inside, new feature that you might notice or might not, well, but it's there, is the inclusion of AC vents on the door pillars over here. Well, you already had AC vents in the center over here. You also get a nice ashtray and cigarette lighter and an additional cup holder right in the center. Now, the seats themselves, well, they're quite comfortable. There's enough and more thigh support, and the seats you can adjust by sliding them forward and backward to increase or reduce your knee room. The seats themselves, there's a nice mirror over here. You can recline them as well and get as comfortable as you want, especially during those long drives. Let's see how it is for seating 3 people. We know that the passenger sitting on either side will be very comfortable, but for the person in the middle, well, the floor is nice and flat, but the seats themselves, well, they're a little bit stiff. But what about the third row of passengers? Tall people better not sit at the back. You do get AC vents to get you comfortable, but in terms of space, there's not much available, and it's best suited for shorter adults or mostly kids. The cabin provides decent amount of storage space and cubby holes, but in case you need more, the roof is lined with 7 individual storage spaces which can be used to accommodate various knickknacks. Now, if we talk about the boot space, well, it's large enough to accommodate a couple of small bags, but in case you need more, you're more than welcome to drop off a couple of passengers who would be sitting in the third row of seats, fold their seats down, and presto, you've got enough and more luggage space. Now let's just see how that increased horsepower has affected the drivability of the Arya. Grab on the gas, and once crossed the 1500 RPM mark, the car just pulls very nicely to its red line of about 4000 RPM. Although you notice that above 3000 RPM, the engine does tend to get a little rough and noisy, but keep it in the green zone, which is between 1500 to 2500 RPM, and settles down into a nice quiet hum. The steering wheel does feel a bit hard, but then it's a hydraulically assisted power unit rather than an electronically assisted one. But I do feel that at slow speeds, it needs to have a little bit more flexibility. I mean, it gives the car a kind of a ponderous and a cumbersome feel to drive, especially at slow speeds, but then as the speed builds up, it feels kind of nice and controlled. What I also like is the way that the steering wheel grips are, and it feels quite nice and meaty to hold. The only problem is that the multifunction steering wheel, well, it has these buttons which are placed right at the extremities. So even if you're holding your hands in the normal position of the steering wheel, they tend to foul a bit, and you'll often notice changing stations and modes even when you don't want to. The gearbox itself, well, although the throws are pretty short, but the only thing is that they don't feel very precise when they shift, and that takes away from the driving and the fun and the premium factor of this otherwise very capable car. Also, the gear lever itself, well, even if you're like the kind who likes to keep your hand on the gear lever, you will feel that there are vibrations that are being transmitted through the gear lever and onto your body. Look on the bright side, you could use it as a nice, handy hand massager. Now the ride of the Arya on the highway, well, it does feel very, very nice. The suspension is tuned so that it absorbs most of the bumps, and even when we're going over these lane markers, just hear them. They really don't intrude into the cabin space so much so as to actually trouble you. But the downside of that is that if you're into a little bit of spirited driving and you want to change directions in a hurry, well, there is a bit of body roll. Well, I think the Arya is a highly misunderstood vehicle. With an options list that's longer than what the competition is even offering, this top-end variant of the Arya comes loaded with the bells and whistles and features that are usually found in cars of a much higher segment. The only thing is that it's not a very involving car to drive, simply because the steering wheel, although it's nice and leathery, but it's a little bit stiff and hard, especially at slow speeds. The gearbox itself, well, it requires a bit of effort to fall into place, and the gear shifts themselves, well, they don't really fall into place with a precise click, and add to that a springy kind of a clutch that takes away from the fun factor of driving the Arya. Having said that, once on the move, the Arya is a very comfortable place to be. So if you're thinking of this vehicle as a passenger car, let me tell you, it absorbs the bumps very well, it handles quite nicely, there is a bit of body roll, but once it's fully loaded, the kind of passenger comfort that it offers in terms of space, the cooling of the AC, the features and all the things that are accessible to you at the back, well, there is really no comparison. The base variant of the Arya now starts at about 9.95 lakh rupees ex-showroom Delhi, and considering the kind of space that you get and the features that you get, I think that's a pretty sweet deal for this particular car.